Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the NASCAR Live on Substack. I am Zach Sterniolo, joined as always by Cameron Richardson, writers at NASCAR.com. And this week we are joined by a special guest, Neil Paine, our first and only so far recurring guest on the Substack Live. Haven't been back on yet this year, but we're thrilled to have you back joining the group this week.
Well, I'm thrilled to be back. I didn't realize that I was the first recurring guest. I feel honored.
Listen, if there was anyone we were going to have on multiple times, it's someone who's as plugged into the stats as you are. We will dive into all of that here today. Obviously, NASCAR is coming off of the Cup Series, at least, is coming off of an off weekend, returning with a bang at Bristol Motor Speedway this week. Plenty to dive into, including Kyle Larson's return to Bristol Bullring. He dominated this race a season ago, but now he's on a 31 race winless drought. What's next for the reigning champion? We'll also dive into Ty Gibbs, who seems like he's getting closer and closer to that first win of his career. Is Bristol where that happens? And we'll also dive into what we've learned so far through 7 races as Neil breaks down everything through the off week, and as well as NASCAR addressing the fuel saving concerns on super speedways. We'll dive into how they're doing that and why. But let's start with the man who won this race a year ago, which is Kyle Larson. Larson made this place look easy last year, 411 laps led of a 500 lap race. But Neil Larson, in the midst of this winless streak that dates back to last spring, what have the stats said about his performance so far that we can take into this weekend?
Well, so first of all, just the phrase 31 race losing streak or winless streak with Kyle Larson is sort of like jarring. Like you don't know what
Yeah.
to do with that. It's kind of crazy to think about. I think in some ways, certainly the results haven't been there for him. We know that not only has he not won, but he only has one top 5 in 7 races and only 4 top 10s. And some of that has been reliability, like just finishing races and being in a position at the end. It's been kind of sorely lacking for him at different times. Now, if you look at the underlying form, I love my driver rating, which is a stat that kind of calculates all of the different performance measures. It kind of throws them into a soup, not just finishes, but also dominance, how much you were in the mix. Did you pass people? Were you passed? All of these different things. And it kind of runs on the scale from, I think the lowest it goes is 23.2, and the highest it goes is 150, and average is 70. So last year, Kyle Larson, and this was a little bit of a down year from him. He was down from 101.2 on average the previous year, which is like, okay, if you're sustaining a driver rating in the triple digits across a whole season, that's pretty crazy and a testament to how great he usually is. Last year was a 94.3. This year, only down to 93.4. So the underlying form actually is not that far off from a year like last year when he won the championship. We, of course, can debate about whether he deserved to win that championship in the end, but certainly he was one of the best drivers last year. He's always one of the best drivers. And when you look at the odds for any given race, just pick it out of the hat. Kyle Larson is usually the favorite. And so to see his sort of form, irrespective of finishes, be pretty much in the neighborhood of what we've been used to seeing, at least last year from him, is a little surprising to me because the narrative is, and maybe it's just with Hendrick as well overall, they did start to tick up a little bit recently, but it's been a tough start to the season for them. And Larson, we expect him to be the banner carrier for that team. And he really has been with Bowman out so much. He hasn't been the worst Hendrick driver, of course, but he's probably been like the 3rd best Hendrick driver so far this season. And we're used to him being number 1 on that team, and we're used to that team being number 1. And neither of those things has really been true so far. And so I think that maybe there's a perception thing happening. But like you mentioned, if there's anywhere that he can turn this around, it's this place in Bristol that has been his personal playground at times. I mentioned the 150 perfect driver rating. That is an accomplishment. My buddy Tyler and I on our podcast, Pod Racing, we always call out whenever there's a 150, just because it's like this special moment where it's like you were perfect, as perfect can be, at least in a NASCAR race. And Kyle Larson, in the 4 years we've been doing the show, he has the vast majority of those 150s. I think Denny Hamlin is second in the number of those. But if anybody's going to put up a 150, it's going to be Kyle Larson. And if he's going to do it any place, it's going to be Bristol, like that race that you mentioned last year where he led 90 95+% of all laps and had that perfect 150 driver rating. So I'm expecting kind of a breakout or a return or whatever you want to call it, a reset for him coming out of the break this week. But what do you guys think?
It does feel like this is that stretch where it's going to happen, if it's going to happen soon, because we know how good he is at Bristol. We know how good he is at Kansas, which is where we're going next weekend. I just feel like he has made this place look so easy at certain times, especially if we don't have one of those unpredictable tire races where we had probably last fall and spring of 2024 for sure. Those are the races where it just becomes unpredictable, right? And they haven't been able to keep up as well as some of the other teams. But if everything is as straightforward as we expect it to be, the five team to me goes into this weekend as the favorite. But Cameron, as they've gone through this winless streak, to Neil's point, they just won the championship in November. How have you seen the number five team handle this stretch of this stretch of adversity personally and professionally? Because we know a year ago, this is when they lost John Edwards, who was a PR rep for the team. They've had some team members who have lost family members over the course of the last year as well. How have you seen the five team handle that handle or overcome that adversity?
I always think with the 5 team, it's a team that turns it on when it's go time. We saw them turn it on during the playoffs last year. Always seem to come out of the gate just slightly behind their teammates. But I think when we talk about obviously, when we talk about, Kyle Larson, and I think of Christopher Bell as well, as I did a short little gallery on NASCAR.com about 5 drivers who can turn around their seasons. I think Larson and Bell have been just fine, but that's not the standard that either of those teams have really set for themselves. But this is the week for them to really showcase, all right, everything's fine, no reason to raise any red flags. But yeah, I think the big conversation about around the 5 isn't more so, okay, what are they needing to overcome? And sure, we could ask them Saturday, what has made you guys just be a little bit slower? Like, what are you still working on that the 9 and 24 really found? Even the 24, I'd expect William Byron to have a win already. So it's, in a way, I guess we're shocked that Hendrick doesn't really have the wins. I mean, obviously, Tyler Reddick, he's got 4 wins and just blazing through this
I was
season.
going to say, he's been occupying victory lane so much that it really has kind of locked out a bunch of other guys that in a normal season where a guy doesn't win, whatever it is, for the first 6 races, they get their wins too. And so I think that that plays a role as well in both all the Hendrick guys, not having won.
It's
Yeah,
fascinating to me. Go ahead,
sorry.
Cameron.
No, I was gonna say, I think Cliff Daniels is just not the crew chief to, panic and stress out the 5 team, and that's when they really start settling in a track where they've had a lot of success. I don't think where they're at right now has them really panicking. Now, if they struggle and aren't really contenders on Sunday, then those sort of start sneaking in, especially when you get into a stretch of races, as you said, Zach, like Kansas, you got Texas after Talladega. If they aren't performing up to standard at those tracks, then that's when questions start to be abound.
For sure. And you look back at a couple of weeks ago at Las Vegas, the Hendrick cars were right up front where we expect them to be with Chase, Byron, and Larson. Now, would that have been as obvious if the Gibbs cars don't get their speeding penalties? There's an argument to be made for that as well. But you talk about Tyler Reddick and the wins that he's racked up. The point standings to me are fascinating in that regard. And maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves here in terms of how we look at these first 7 races. But you look at the top four in points, and it's Tyler Reddick, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott. All 4 are the only 4 drivers who have wins so far this season. To me, that tells me that the changes made in the offseason to the points format are working.
Yeah, completely. And, some of that is like Reddick, you mentioned the top 4. It really is like a top 1 and then the next 3 because Blaney is 82 points behind Reddick. And then there's like 22 points separating Blaney from Elliott, and then it goes down to Byron. But I think you make a great point that I think one of the reasons why we had the win and in is because we wanted to emphasize wins. We wanted to make it be the case that if you're a fan and you're watching and you've seen a guy win a lot of races, you want to feel like that's rewarded, and you want to align the incentives of driving also to be with like going for wins. Well, you could do that through winning in, but that has a lot of other downstream consequences, which we saw and dissected endlessly over the past 10 years. But you can also do this where you just give that 15-point bonus to relative to last year for winning each race. And that accomplishes a lot of the same stuff. We'll get into how it doesn't perfectly accomplish the same stuff, but I think maybe in a good way, but it gets you to the point where, like you said, the race winners are at the top of the standings. Yet also you get credit. It's not all or nothing. You get credit for performance in the week to week consistency as well. And in some ways, I don't want to, declare victory yet on this system. But I do think it is like it's done a good job, it seems so far, at threading that needle between not overrating consistency at the expense of excellence, but also giving you credit for being in victory lane consistently.
Totally agree.
If I may quickly, I think the win value has gone up, but as well as overall consistency, the value for both of them has truly, I think, gone up with the chase format. As Zach said, the top four are all having wins this season. But I think it's overall, you could see, a driver struggle. Like, look at someone like Chase Briscoe, who could turn it around. And, he has a big points day Sunday, then he's back in the top 16. But I think a consistent season, like I was just saying, a quiet, consistent season, like a Bell is having, a William Byron is having, that's still going to pay value. But winning still, it's not just, all right, one win, then we could take 26, 25 races off. Like Tyler Reddick is trying to win every race possible. So I still think with this format, I think it's been a total success because I think just the win value and consistency value has gone up.
Now, before we go any further, I did a terrible job as a host introducing Neil Paine to our audience. Now, if you've joined us in our Substack lives at the end of the 2025 season, you are familiar with Neil and the great work that he does. But Neil, you're a little bit of everywhere. You're writing a column for us on NASCAR.com every week. You also have that pod racing as you just plugged. What else have you got going on, and where can people really get to know your work?
Well, so I write also columns for ESPN. I just got done doing Bubble Watch for them. So if you're following college basketball and who was going to make the tournament, you could check me out there. Now I'm going to pivot to doing some hockey and some basketball for them. We got playoffs coming up there, some WNBA now that we're actually going to have a season, which is nice. And then otherwise, find me on Substack, neilpaine.substack.com. Write a lot about baseball. I've got a lot of forecast models, which shouldn't surprise you guys. In addition to my NASCAR predictions and rankings and stuff that I have on there. Oh yeah, and I have a daily prediction market focused sports newsletter called Scoreboard for Sherwood.news. So if you go to Sherwood.news, you can check that out. And I had a whole thing about the World Chess Championships this morning. So truly feeling immersed in a bunch of different sports right now.
You may very well be the busiest man in sports.
It might be.
Hey,
Oh,
he doesn't have to talk about Miami, Ohio for a straight month from February to March. So
Thank goodness. By the way, I mean it was a great story. I was rooting for them. I'm glad they were able to get in and even win a tournament game.
I think we all were on that one. Let's transition now to Ty Gibbs, and we talked about him on the show last week and about the growth and the maturity that we've seen from him on the track this year. But obviously, he's still looking for that first win. Neil, you have a column coming out tomorrow on NASCAR.com. I don't want to give away all the secrets yet, but he has been excellent in his Cup career at Bristol, even if he hasn't broken through for the win itself yet. Is this the weekend that changes?
Yeah, well, I think all the signs are pointing to him being at least in a position, and we saw some of this in previous Bristol races, even last fall, where he is very likely to be in a position to potentially win. Now, can he actually do that? That we know that is kind of the difference between first and second is a huge gap in NASCAR for sure. But I like a lot of the ways that things are trending for him. And in the story, I thought it was really interesting that, he's gone through a lot of kind of ups and downs. He's still just 23, but it feels like he's gone through almost like a whole, half a career worth of these kind of storylines, from the young hotshot, Xfinity winner. I mean, he won his very first race that he ever entered, which was one of the first times, I think it was the first time that someone with no national series experience previously won a race in their debut, which he did in the Xfinity series a handful of years ago. And so you've got this like very young hotshot narrative, and he made some enemies along the way also in Xfinity for sure. And then he kind of carries over sort of the bad parts of that, but maybe not so much of the good parts of that into Cup. There's a lot of learning experiences, and we're kind of waiting for him to break through, get that first win. There have been moments where it seems like he would do that. He did win the in-season challenge, which is like its own thing. Hang a banner for that, if you will. Maybe not if you're an NBA team like the Knicks, I think it was, that didn't want to hang one. But the point is that there have been these flashes of moments where it seems like, okay, he's going to have a breakthrough. This is going to be it. But he has gone the first 130 starts of his career without a win. And I looked this up for the story because I was like, oh, that is actually a surprisingly large number. If he feels so young, it's surprising that he's had that many without a win. Well, so Ricky Rudd, among the group of drivers all time in the modern era who had at least 130 races before their first win, Ricky Rudd is first in career wins. He ended up, after winning his first one in race number 161, he ended up winning 23 times. I mean, just an awesome, one of my favorites growing up, and just a great kind of late bloomer type of story. But then after him is Sterling Marlin at 10 wins, and he didn't win his first until number 279. And then it's Alec Bowman and Kyle Petty at 8 each. But you see where I'm going here. The
Yeah.
list of eventual wins by guys that took at least 130 races to win their first race is like surprisingly sparse. You end up not really getting guys, if they're gonna end up rattling off a ton of wins in their Cup career, they're probably gonna do it in that first 130 or 129, I guess, races. And so that is at odds with how we see Ty Gibbs. Now, some of it is he's a lot younger than the other guys. He's still 23. That's the benefit of being able to debut as a teenager. Ricky Rudd was 26. Kyle Petty was 26. Alex Bowman was 26. And Austin Dillon, he's also on that list. He was 27 when he won his first race. So he is at least 3 to 4 years younger than a lot of the other names on the list. I thought it was funny. Sterling Marlin was 37 when he won his first, and Michael Waltrip, we know how long it took him to win. He was 38 when he got that Daytona win in 2001. So your prime years are kind of being chewed up if you start at a normal time and then you take this long to end up winning. The benefit for Ty Gibbs is he's not quite into those prime years yet. He's gotten a head start on everyone else. So I think it's a little bit of a different comparison. That is positive for him. The other positive thing is he's been really, really, really good and really consistent this year in a year where consistency is prized, like we were just talking about. He's finished top 6 in each of the past 5 races. He's been in the mix. He's been running near the front in a lot of these races as well, kind of in a position to, like, if things break the right way, he could have already gotten that win. And you mentioned, Zach, earlier, Bristol is one of his best tracks. We don't necessarily talk about him the same way that we talk about a Larson or some of the other guys that have dominated here, or because they've won here, he hasn't. But he has consistently run extremely well to the point that this is one of his best tracks, certainly among the non-road courses. He's very good on the road courses. And so to me, all those things are coming together. Combine that with the fact that at all of his stops so far this year since Atlanta, he has run well ahead of his previous career averages at that track. That tells me that he is showing a lot of improvement this season overall. And so you've got this cocktail of like lots of improvement. He is kind of coming into his peak as a driver. The team is running really well as well. We know the Toyotas have been great this year, JGR being a prime driver of that. And then you come to one of his best tracks historically. It feels like this is the perfect storm for him to have a really strong chance to win his first race.
Couldn't agree more. Cameron, anything else on Ty Gibbs before we jump into Talladega?
Well, I think it's positive for the progression of his career that we're talking about Ty Gibbs in being one of those drivers who had to come up in the first year of the next gen car. Now his came very later because of the Kurt Busch injury, but he's not trapped in this purgatory iceberg of being frozen at a certain pace like a Todd Gilliland or a Noah Gragson. No, it has nothing to do with, talent, just more so with the ride that they have. But Ty Gibbs, as Neil said, he's been good on road courses. He's been good on ovals. He's been good on short tracks. So the fact that Ty Gibbs is having this success this season is a sign of his progression to Cup Series, and he's still very young. And I think we forget about that fact with a lot of Cup drivers coming up is that we kind of give up on them if they're not winning 20, 30 races in. I know people are going to panic about Connor Zilic next, and that's going to be a big talking point over the next couple of years. But Ty Gibbs, I think that win is coming very soon. It very well could be on Sunday, but I think it's good for his progression that we are talking about Ty Gibbs in this light.
I agree, and especially considering he has another teammate who's 21st in points. We mentioned Chase Briscoe earlier. That Ty is not that guy. I think is doing a whole lot of good for that 54 team, considering there were already kind of discussions about what he was doing last year, and certainly the turmoil that became both on and off the racetrack. So I think the fact that he's as high in points as he is now, he's sixth entering the Bristol weekend. He's again, like Neil said, he's finished top six in each of the last 5 races. Literally, once we got out of the super speedways, he has not finished. He's finished fourth, fifth, or sixth. It's been absolutely incredible to see, and he's the second best Gibbs car in points right now, behind Denny Hamlin. And the only guys in front of him are Reddick, Blaney, Hamlin, Elliott, and Byron. I feel like that's pretty good company to surround yourself with, especially with Bell, Keselowski, and Larson in your rearview mirror. Let's pivot ahead here a couple of weeks to Talladega. On Hauler Talk last night, NASCAR announced a couple of things. Let's start with stage lengths. The first stage will now be the longest stage in the Jack Links 500 on April 21st, with each of the final 2 stages set for no longer than a fuel run. Cameron, we still don't have an official lap count, but John Probst, who is NASCAR's EVP, Chief Racing Development Officer, said this is all in an effort to combat the rampant fuel saving that we've seen at super speedways recently. Do you think the change was needed, and do you think it's the right step to take as we head into Talladega in a couple of weeks?
You at least need to take the swing. And at the end of the day, it's all going to be what the teams and drivers end up doing and how they want to race at a track like the Daytona and Talladega, where you can't really break away from the pack. Now, I've been saying for the last 2-3 years, why not just 5 or 6 cars? Just take off, run the whole race at 100% and see how everyone else responds. But no one has really been taking action. Everyone's kind of just in one step in Lockheed, and you get a pack of 30, 35 cars running at the exact same speed. And it's great for photo ops. But when I'm big on competition, and just that until we get to the final 50 laps, it's just hasn't really been there. Now it's all part of strategy. You want to spend the fewest amount of seconds on pit road as possible. But I'm really curious to see if there is a sort of quasi chess match going on. And if you have a really long opening stage where you're probably going to have 2 required pit stops, do these guys race hard? Do we see these small little packs break out to where like these guys are actually racing, kind of like how we saw at in the final stage of the Daytona 500, where you had all these manufacturers split up and the racing and everyone coming off pit road, it turned into there was some pretty crazy action going on track. Does this become a 100, almost its own race in its own, to see how everyone goes for those first stage points, just because we haven't had a stage that's going to be as long as this will be, depending on whatever the laps are. But yes, I do think change was necessary for this, and it definitely makes Talladega more interesting. It definitely allows the crew chiefs to play around a little bit than what we're used to.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of any kind of changes that are made by, a league or an organizing body that try to kind of nudge competitors in a particular direction without coming down with like a heavy-handed sort of like, rules enforcement to try to get the outcome, but instead provide incentives or disincentives to try to kind of get you to naturally go the way that you want them to go. And I agree with you, Cam. Like, something had to be done. These are some of our prestige and premier races. You can't have guys driving around in like a moving parking lot at like partial throttle. They're called super speedways. We want to see speed, and especially for fans that might be just getting into NASCAR, these are some of the only races they might watch. And so the big appeal is we want to see speed. We want to see that. I mean, I would love if we'll never go back to it, but Bill Elliott being able to make it back from down 3 laps at Talladega in whatever it was, 1984 or whatever, on green flag was one of the most insane things because he was able to drive that car like 220 miles per hour. I'm not asking for that again. I know that's unsafe and there's a lot of things around that, but I would love to see them be able to get the most out of these machines at the tracks that theoretically enable it the most. And we just haven't seen that consistently because of the incentives that there's just no incentive to do it. Like you guys were talking about, it really makes sense to save fuel and drive around at partial throttle under the old setup. So I would love to see teams break out of that and have an incentive to go harder.
Well, that's exactly it for me. Will it work? We'll find out. But I'm optimistic if they say that the stage lengths for both stage two and stage three are going to be less than a fuel run. There is no incentive to conserve all that fuel, right? It's go and position yourself now, and then hold off everyone else behind you. Now, I do think back to the early 2000s, right? And a guy like Dale Jarrett who would ride around at the back of the field and then methodically work his way up. I don't know if you can do that with this car, with this configuration, and all of those things, right? So to me, that means as soon as the green flag waves in stage two, I'm doing whatever I can to be at the front of the field and control those lines. The other part of that is that they still don't pay points until the end of the stages and the end of the race. So you still have to keep your nose clean and you have to be smart about how you get up there. But when you don't have an incentive to ride around at 165, when you can go all out at 190, I think that's better for everyone involved. Honestly, staying on the Talladega subject, NASCAR announced on Holler Talk as well last night that Cletus McFarland has not been approved to compete in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race that weekend. I thought that he was reasonable in the 33 in his debut at Rockingham last weekend, but he was involved in three separate accidents, three separate incidents, I should say. And ultimately, I just feel like this is the right call. The guy has 5 starts in total in ARCA. He has 6 laps in a race in the Truck Series. He has the 244 race laps that he got at Rockingham in the O'Reilly car. I just think it's reasonable to want a guy like that who, despite his following, doesn't have the racecraft experience yet. I think it's reasonable to want a guy like that to have more seat time before you send him out in a 195-mile-an-hour pack of 35 cars.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean, it's going to be a great story when he does get that opportunity, and I think we're just kind of waiting for him to have the experience for that. But I think that's what separates NASCAR from other sports is it's a partnership between the competitors. Everyone puts their trust in everyone else, and there's a belief that everyone kind of knows all the little ins and outs, not just the basics, but you have to kind of have that experience. And the only way to know those things is through seat time and reps. So I know he'll get there eventually. I know it's disappointing to not be able to do this. And, it would be cool to kind of follow from the inside, like that whole experience as well. But at the same time, it is like safety is important. And this is a different sport from other sports in which you're kind of putting your trust in the other competitors out there.
Like, you can look back at the NFL season last year and you can have Philip Rivers come off the bench after 5 years and go ahead and suddenly he's an NFL quarterback again. It's a different game. Like, if he's risking his own personal bodily injury, not that of others around him. And we have to be realistic about this. Connor Zilic got hurt last year in the O'Reilly Series race. A lot of things can happen. Now, if you're going to have crashes on super speedways, no doubt about it. But I would rather trust that the guys on track have a little bit more seat time, have a little bit more experience or racing around, driving around other people before sending them out there, Kim.
Yeah, I hate to bring up this comparison, but I sort of see it like how I do with celebrity boxing and YouTuber boxing, someone like Jake Paul, where clearly, the biggest compliment I can give both Cletus and Jake Paul is that there's clearly respect for the craft. These guys still train their butts off, and while you can hide a little bit on who you match up with in boxing to sort of boost your record, there's no hiding in NASCAR. These guys all want to beat each other. NASCAR drivers' egos are too high to want to be like, all right, well, I'm racing around this big celebrity YouTuber. No, you want to kick his butt on the track. And so that's why you see a guy like Cletus jump into a really tough series like O'Reilly and by comparison to the rest of the field look really bad. Now for his standard, like Zach said, definitely respectable effort at the very least that we could call it. Um, but yeah, you jump into the second highest level of stock car racing in the country, you're gonna be made to look silly by the rest of the field that's done this. And there's definitely a lot of time and a lot of other racing to do where you can get that seat time. And seat time is the most important thing in all of motorsport around the world. Seat time is the biggest value to your development. So I hope he does run other tracks and doesn't really give up his dream, a dream to accomplish whatever his goals are in NASCAR. But yeah, the the respect for the craft is there, but I agree with NASCAR that yeah, he probably shouldn't be running an O'Reilly car at Talladega.
It's just such a step up from any other type of track as well that you can't really apply what you know from other tracks to a super speedway. So it would be I can't even think of a comparison from some other sport. I'm usually pretty good with those, but it's just such a different. It's like playing a different sport, racing between a super speedway and a drafting style of racing, and like every other type of racing.
And listen, to his credit, he made 3 super speedway starts in the ARCA series. He's raced at Daytona twice in the ARCA, as well as once at Talladega, and then he started the truck race at Daytona back in February. But on lap 6, he was on the bottom of a 3 wide situation, and the air works differently in NASCAR than in any other form of motorsports and any other sport that you can think of. And the air turned him around, and it's what you can do when the car when the thing you're driving at 109 miles an hour is sideways. He has great car control. I don't worry about his ability to drive things fast. It's a matter of, can I trust you around 35 other professional race car drivers to to put yourself and your competitors in the best positions possible for you all to make it out of the next corner and to see the checkered flag. It's a great conversation. I'm thrilled that he's part of this because I think he does bring a lot of good things to NASCAR. But to me, there's no reason to rush the process whatsoever. Um, Going back to the Cup Series and this season, Neil, you had a great piece coming into the off week for NASCAR.com about kind of what we've learned heading into the Easter break. Um, I'll start with this. What do you feel like is your biggest surprise so far as you put that story together?
Well, the biggest surprise was how clear cut you can see the effect of the chase system already in place. So, what I did was I looked at average finish for kind of each ranking slot. So, the top 16 last year at this point in the season through 7 races by average finish, and then the top 16 this year. And I was expecting it like, well, obviously, Tyler Reddick is going to be way lower than everyone else, who I think was Larson led at this time last year because he won so many races. But I thought it would kind of track otherwise pretty similarly. But I was shocked to see that at every, and I have this chart in the story, I'd encourage people to go see it, but at every single ranking slot in the top 16, the driver at that slot in 2026 is like a position or a half a position better in terms of average finish than their equivalent was a year ago. To me, that is like proof positive that guys are taking that consistency and they're not giving up positions as part of the chase rewarding points racing rather than the kind of crazy swings at wins to try to get in that you used to see. Instead, I feel like they very clearly have received the message already that it's really about, preserving your spot on the track and finishing well, not taking too many unnecessary risks. If you have a chance to win, that's fine. But trying to make the difference between like, okay, I can finish top 10. Let's try to do that. Let's try to be consistent, get back out on the track if something goes wrong. And it just shows up so clearly. The other thing that I thought was interesting is there are signs that the horsepower changes, like to the package at short tracks and road courses, have made a difference. Not so much on road courses, but certainly on under a mile and a half long tracks. There have been, especially at Phoenix and Darlington, more lead changes and a lot more green flag passes than there were at the equivalent race in previously in the next gen era. So those are two like big picture trends that I was kind of surprised it was so clear that these initiatives that management put in at the beginning of the season have paid so many dividends right away. And then you get into, obviously, Reddick is the big story, his domination at the beginning of the year. I think Denny Hamlin still being one of the best, if not the best drivers in the series at age 45, that was not something that we could have completely taken for granted, just based on a number of factors. His age, of course, that's a age in which I think even among great drivers, you've done 95% of your winning or top fives or top tens by that age. You're basically like, that's the end of the peak for most guys. He's still running as strong, arguably, as ever, which is wild. But then also just the way that last season ended, all the hardships of the offseason, for him to summon the focus and the determination to get back in that car and do this all over again, knowing what could happen if things beyond his control play out, is just such a testament to him. And so I am both surprised and not surprised by that because he is one of the best. And then Hendrick not being as dominant is certainly a surprise. We've talked about it, I think, a lot as collectively as the NASCAR media in the first handful of races. They are upticking a little bit recently. I'm curious to see how much they can kind of use that. We talked about Larson possibly using Bristol as a jumping off point. Toyota has been awesome. This is arguably their best season in Cup, like ever, going back to 2007 when they went in. A lot of that's Tyler Reddick winning helps a lot, but it's also everyone else in the Toyota stable, and not just wins, but also top fives and top tens. They're punching way above their weight in terms of their share of those relative to the number of cars in the field. And then one last thing that was surprising to me is we all talked about Connor Zilic. I was not guilty. I was participating in the hyping of Zilic as much as anyone. He's faced a learning curve this year, and I think that maybe we shouldn't have been surprised, but his numbers, in the developmental organizations were so strong that you thought if anybody had a chance to jump right in and start dominating, or at least, doing very well right away, it would be him. He still faced the same learning curve that Ty Gibbs faced, that everybody faces. So the flip side of that is his teammate SVG has been great. He has shown tremendous amount of improvement. Not only has he been good on the road courses, I know he didn't win at COTA earlier, but he was, pretty much same old SVG. Otherwise, certainly in the O'Reilly race, he did his SVG thing that weekend. But really, mainly, it's the short tracks, it's the drafting tracks, and it's even the ovals, which were his biggest areas of struggle last year and have traditionally been the place where it's just like, yeah, he's a road course ringer who is able to, sometimes show flashes at other tracks, but not consistently. Now he has consistently run quite well, especially at drafting tracks and short tracks so far. And even the ovals, he hasn't been average, but he's been much closer to average than he was last year. So I've been very pleased to see his improvement. And I almost feel like that could rub off on Zilic as well, because if you're going to tap anybody for advice about how to kind of go from being like, okay, I'm really good on road courses, I need to learn how these next gen cars behave at other track types. Here's a guy that shows the template for that in a very short period of time. He has learned and gotten a lot better. I mean, he's way better now than he was even last year, much less, a couple years ago.
Completely agreed. I also want to hit on Kyle Busch and his fall off, because I think especially going to Bristol, right? Like, he dominated this place for years. he doesn't even have a lead lap finish at Bristol in the next gen car, which is hard to, I mean, almost impossible to fathom. Doesn't have a top 10 finish here in this car. What, and it's really just hard to ignore just how irrelevant the number 8 has been, and just in general this season since leaving Daytona. What do the numbers say so far, and do you think that he can rebound anytime soon?
Yeah, I don't think he can rebound as long as he's in this RCR car. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I'm of two minds on Bush because just in terms of like his performance and the way he's finished, the way he's been running, this is like by far the worst season of his career. But it also is part of a long running trend of, I mean, he's since the late 2010s, he has really kind of almost consistently gone downhill every single season, and he was starting from such a high point in the he was still like champion driver at that level in the late 2010s, that it was easy for us to kind of okay, a little fall off 1 year here, a little fall off there, even by the end of the Gibbs tenure. But especially in the RCR era, aside from that little, like I think it was a half season of Renaissance where we're like, Kyle Busch is back, baby, RCR is back. Otherwise, it has been this kind of consistent downhill trend for him, and I just don't see that getting much better as long as the current conditions are the same for him. I think there's always going to be a question about how much of it is still him. Like, would he be doing better if he was in better equipment on a better team? I think there's a case for that. I think there have been a lot of cases where you could tell that he was trying everything he could to try to wring performance out of these cars. And if he had a better team around him, he would probably be like at that average level rather than this like very below average level. We'll never know. But I mean, RCR as a whole has been horrible. This is probably this might be their worst season in Cup as a team, as an organization, and they've fallen off kind of in lockstep as well. So I think we're going to look back, unfortunately, as this being like Kyle Busch. His time with RCR is almost like a, like Joe Namath playing for the Rams or something. Remember
Yeah,
all these players,
yeah.
like great players in weird jerseys at the tail end of their career, kind of just trying to rediscover the magic and it not being there anymore. And that's really sad because I think NASCAR is much better when Kyle Busch is one of the best drivers because he's one of the most entertaining. Love him or hate him, he's one of the most entertaining drivers out there. And so, yeah, I don't know what the answer is, and I don't think he knows what the answer is either. And it's tough to see a guy that's always consistently, no matter what he's driven at any level, been able to overcome what's wrong with it and be able to wring performance and wins out of these cars, to just not have an answer right now.
Truly, he's taken the Shaquille O'Neal path to where here's this game shaker on the Magic and the Lakers and that little run with the Miami Heat, just all time generational great. And now the Kyle Busch we see now is definitely the Shaq that was on the Cavs, and
Celtics.
then that ending with
Celtics.
the Celtics. My goodness.
And unfortunately, I'm getting a whole lot of flashbacks to last year and Russell Wilson on the New York Giants as well. That's about all the time we have for this week's episode. Gosh, we could keep going for a whole another hour, I feel like, but thank you for joining. And again, I want to make sure that people know where they can find you and your content, especially over the next couple of weeks.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Again, it's always a pleasure. And yeah, they can find my columns at NASCAR.com, of course. They can find, like I said, I'm going to be writing about hockey and basketball playoffs more for ESPN starting soon. They can find me at neilpaine.substack.com for everything else. And then I have a newsletter for Sherwood News called Scoreboard. If you want to kind of just get a taste of like, hey, what are the odds of all the stuff around all the stuff that's happening in sports today? So we have a good time over there. Encourage everybody to check it out.
Awesome stuff. Cameron, you ready for Bristol?
Absolutely, man. One of my favorite trips. Just the Bristol, the city, the town of Bristol itself is just a beautiful place. So always very excited to return to the last great Coliseum.
You and me both. Cameron and I will both be there this weekend. You can follow me on X at Zaxter, ZACHSTUR. You can find Cameron at The Rich Report over there as well. We'll have plenty of coverage coming straight from Bristol, Tennessee, all weekend long. We're going to make that drive up tomorrow and get right into it on Friday with the Craftsman Truck Series. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you all next week. Thanks.
Bye.